There was a lot of instances in my life between my health, my career, just being a mom. My only option was push through and rise. I mean, that's how I adopted it. It's just you can go through it and mumble and grumble and this and that, or you can get through it and grow and, learn.
Welcome to The Narrative, a podcast of untold stories, a place where silence is broken, secrets are unearthed, and stories find their voice. From intergenerational wisdom to identity, race, purpose, and power, this is a sacred space for the stories we were never taught to tell, but always needed to hear. Because healing begins when our stories are spoken. Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Crystal Ann England, licensed marriage and family therapist. And this is the Narrative of Untold Stories podcast. And today I am sitting down with Amy Dave. Amy, please go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So I am a physician assistant and a women's wellness coach, and my focus is helping the women live a life without their monthly PMS symptoms.
Amy, what got you into this work?
Ever since I graduated, I was very big on preventive medicine. So using diet and exercise. At that time, I thought to prevent diseases like heart disease, diabetes, cancer. But I learned fairly quickly in my practice when I was going to work that I didn't have much time in, these 15-minute appointment time slots. You don't have a lot of time to give people education. You can hand them a piece of paper and say, here, try the Mediterranean diet. It might help. Or you need to lose 15 pounds. Like, go for a walk every day, something. But a lot of times the patients would come back in 6 months or 3 months and they would have the same issues and there was nothing different. They'd be like, oh, I tried that diet for a few weeks. I didn't like it. So I stopped. And at that time, I didn't really know that there was other options. Eventually, I was a stay-at-home mom for many years. Then I decided to go back to school. And when I went back to school, I got an advanced certificate in nutrition alongside my master's degree. And that's where I learned the foods we eat, the exercises we do, our stress, our sleep can all affect our hormones, our body. I was blown away. I didn't know any of this information. None of my doctors had ever told me this. I never said this to my patients at work, right? So there was a lady in my nutrition class. She was a guest lecturer. She taught about something called cycle syncing, which is where you really live in tune with your monthly cycle because your body's going through 4 phases every month. And she was saying, the foods you eat, the exercises you do should vary based on where you are in the cycle. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. I bought her book, and this was probably in like 2000, maybe 16 or 17. And that book sat on my nightstand for several months. It collected dust. Eventually, it got moved to my bookshelf where it collected more dust. Because at that time, I had 3 little kids. I was in school. Then I went back to work. Life was busy, right? I was like, yeah, someday. And then COVID hit. And all of a sudden, I had all this time. And I was staring at my bookshelf one day and I saw that book and I was like, you know what? I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to sit down. I have the time. I'm going to read it. So my main issue was I was having a lot of cramping every month, a lot of irritability, and a lot of heavy bleeding. And that was the reason I was like, I need to stop having this much heavy bleeding. Like it's not good for me. It's making me tired. I was always low in iron. So I was anemic. And I read this book and I started making the changes that she recommended. Within 4 months, my symptoms were gone. I was, like, so amazed by this. I'm like, "Wow, I just changed, like, the foods I was eating and how I was exercising," and nobody had ever told me this, right? That, if you have PMS symptoms, you're told it's normal. It's part of being a woman, right? Take your medication, take your use birth control if you have to, use your heating pad and power through. And then so now it's been several years that I've been doing this, but, the first 4 months, my physical symptoms went away. Then I noticed I was sleeping better and I had more mental clarity. And my kids and my husband noticed that I wasn't yelling at them as often. So my irritability was less, my moods were more stable. My migraines went away. I used to get migraines all the time. I always had pain medication in my purse. They went away. Um, I just had so many things kind of snowball from that initial, first few steps that I took. And now, like I said, it's become second nature to me. And I know, like, for example, the holidays were last month, right? So I deviated a little bit from my healthy eating regimen and this and that. And in January this month, I felt it, right? I had more cramps than usual. My cycle was a little bit longer than it should have been. Like it got delayed a few days. So,
But this is proof, Amy, that what that the method that you have been using works.
yes. Yeah.
Because when you deviate from it, you're reminded the following month of why you need to stick to it. But I'm curious
Yes.
though, Amy, when you say, that you changed your diet, what kinds of changes did you make? Did you throw out everything in your entire pantry and start fresh?
Nope. That's the
Okay.
great part.
Okay.
So if you think of the 4 phases that we go through every month as the seasons.
Okay, so share with the people what that is in case they don't.
Yep. So every month we all we have our monthly bleed, right? And if you're tracking ovulation, if you're trying to get pregnant, that's ovulation that's in the middle of the month, right? So those are 2 of your 4 phases, and there's 2 other phases. The week right after your bleed is called the follicular phase, and that PMS week is called the luteal phase. It has a name. So if you think of these 4 phases as the 4 seasons, and a lot of it is intuitive, right? So on your bleed, it's considered the winter season. So you're cold, right? You wanna dress warm, you wanna eat warm foods. You may be kind of not as active outside and this and that, right? The follicular phase is like spring. So it's new beginnings. You wanna eat lighter foods. Your creativity is actually really high in this phase. When you're ovulating, we get the surge of testosterone, so we have maximum energy for the month, and that's our summer season. So you wanna eat cooling foods, salads, smoothies, raw fruits and vegetables, right? Um, and then again in the PMS week too, like your cravings can tell you that your body's lacking nutrients. So if you're craving fatty foods, you may not want to eat the desserts. You might want to eat like an avocado, which has healthy fats or nuts, right? If you're craving salty foods, you're actually might be low in magnesium. So you need dark leafy greens and, foods with magnesium in it or a magnesium, like a salt bath or something. So it's now to me, it's, second nature. And it is kind of intuitive if you think about it, but we're trained from a very young age to ignore it. We're trained to ignore our bodies, ignore the changes, and just kind of do the same thing every day, eat the same foods, push through. And when you realize this and you start thinking about this, you'll see like, okay, that last week that salad tasted really great, but this week, I'm not into it because your body doesn't want that salad. It wants something warm like a soup. And so once you relearn to listen to your body or even learn for the first time, like many of us don't even, like I never knew this, so I never paid attention. But if you're learning it for the first time or if you're relearning it because you were trained to ignore it, um, it can make significant changes in your health and wellness.
But Amy, even as you're saying that, I'm thinking, um, you know, the body, mind, spirit, everything is connected, right? So if we are disconnected from the signals that our body are sending, it's usually a good indicator that we're also disconnected from the signals that our spirit and our
Yes.
emotional self is sending to, right? And this is the more that we become in sync with our bodies, then the easier it becomes to also become in sync in our mind and in our spirit because we're paying attention, right? Okay. Yeah, I'm feeling low energy today. I'm not going to go out and try to do all these things and push myself to run the 3 miles that I usually run every day. Instead, I'm going to go for a walk, maybe for a couple of miles and take it easy and, right? Just paying attention. And I'm saying all of that to say, do you notice or did you notice within yourself, right? Because everything starts with self first. that when you started to become more in sync with your body, that you also became more in sync with your emotional self?
So, like I said, it started with my physical symptoms. And then when I felt better, I had more energy, I had more mental clarity, and knew I wanted to teach this to other women. I joined a coaching program. So it was like a 1-year program, how to become a coach and this and that. And that was the first time in my life I've ever worked with mentors and coaches. I was not very spiritual. I was not connected to my emotions at all. But through going through my own change and then working with my coaches, I became much more aware of spirituality and how the universe works, laws of attraction and this and that. Um, I started making shifts in my own life. I started doing some meditation, some journaling, really reflecting back on stories or situations from childhood that we still carry, every day with us, and just questioning a lot of things that you used to believe as true. So there has been definitely exponential growth, I will say. And that especially was through working with my mentors. But it's just, if you knew me 6 years ago, for my family and friends who have known me a long time, they will tell you I'm like a new woman, a different person.
What do you think they would say? How would they describe me back then versus how they describe me now?
Back then, I was very superficial. I did not have, I didn't care to have deep relationships with anybody.
Yeah.
Everything was surface level conversations. I checked out. I was not present. Um, there's a lot of times where when I had my 3 young kids very close together, so when they were young, it was tough times. I used to say, like, I felt like a zombie, just kinda going through the motions and doing the thing, but I wasn't really there mentally. I was checked out, and that's different now. I'm a lot more present, both in adult conversations and conversations with my kids, with activities. Um, I'm much more aware of life and gratitude and, being happy for the things I have. I've learned that happiness does not come from external sources, it comes from me. Right? It doesn't come from my husband, it doesn't come from my material possessions, it doesn't come from my whatever career, it comes from within. So all of these changes, and it wasn't like night and day, it's been a subtle shift over the years. But there has definitely been improvement.
Who do you think in your life has noticed it the most?
Probably those closest to me, so my husband, my kids, and my parents, just because I see them every day almost. But I would think that even my friends who have known me, longer than 5 years or 6 years, they probably notice a difference in the way I interact when we talk on the phone or when we get together. I'm making much more eye contact. I'm making sure I'm not doing anything else or thinking about anything else. I'm, like, listening to their conversation. And then as a coach too, like, you learn to listen and ask the right questions. So it's much more engaging probably in my conversations. And, I've gotten compliments that you just look different. You look more confident. You look like you're glowing, right? Like, for people who haven't seen me in a couple years, they say, "Oh my gosh, you look like you're glowing." I have had 3 or 4 different people tell me this, like, on separate occasions, and I'm like, "Oh, thank you." So they do notice a difference.
So within, then without, right? Outside. So whatever it is that is inside, it often shows up. It shows up in our aura. It shows up in how we, you're just walking, mind your own business. Someone says, "Wow, you look really," and you're like, "Oh, okay. Ooh, that," right? It's this confirmation that growth is happening inside. 'Cause people can, I don't know what it is, but you're glowing. Something about you feels different, right? Almost this magnetism. And I think that that's what happens, that as we are going through life and we are present and more open and more aware of our footprint through this journey, that people see us differently, right? Let me ask you, because I think culture is such a huge part of who we are as people. It shapes our perception. And I'm wondering, culturally, how did you grow up? When you think about culture, what do you identify most with?
So my parents are first generation immigrants from India. So I'm born and raised in New York, but they came here in the 70s. Um, so it was, very traditional Indian culture at home, but then we were assimilated into the American culture, right from the beginning. So it was interesting. And a lot of my cousins and our local Indian friends were also in the same boat. The parents had come in the 70s. And so we all kind of grew up with this on the weekends. We'd all be hanging out, at all the different Indian aunties and uncles' houses and this and that. And then we'd be in school and we'd have our friends and we'd have, you know, our activities and this and that. And my husband grew up in India and he came here when he was 19, right? So he had already done a year of college in India and everything when
Mhm.
he came here. Um, and so it's very interesting now, especially when my kids were younger, but even now, they have to play an instrument in school. They have to take a language. And I was like, yeah, I had to do that. I did that. Whereas my husband's like, we had one telephone between four houses. And if somebody called, like we would have to run and go call the other neighbor and be like, hey, your family's calling. And so he grew up more like my parents did. And so it's very funny when we try to tell our kids like stories because I relate more to them and their school experiences and, like sleepovers with friends and summer camp.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, I went to summer camp. Whereas my husband, he relates more to my parents' generation about um, their experiences and coming here and being an immigrant and all that. So it's a very it's a fun family dynamic. I'm sure my kids are getting a little bit of both. Um, but it has also been an area of struggle, right? Because the cultural norms are different in India than they are here. Um, and so that affected our marriage. That affected how we, you know, deal with certain issues in the family and stuff. So it's got its good and its bad. But I can't change it. So that's what it is.
And all of it, Amy, it every part of that is a part that adds to the person that you are, right? And those experiences of what it is to have parents that are immigrants hugely shaped, I'm sure, your story of who you are and how you perceive the world and how you, um, and even then how you raise your kids, right? So when you think about how your parents raised you versus how you raise your kids, what do you think are a couple of the differences in approach?
They were more into the traditional Indian model, right? So my grandmother lived with us. It's very common for the parents as they get older, your kids move in with you and then you have multi-generational homes. My husband grew up like that. And when we got married and the question came up of will his parents live with us? And I was like, no. I grew up in a place where, my parents left their home country. They left their parents back there, right? All of my friends, their parents were doing well. They were well off. When they started getting married, they moved out or they lived with their parents for like 6 months until they found an apartment or something, and then they moved out. And so for me, it was just like, okay, when you get married, you go and you start your own life together. And my husband, when he came, his parents also came. So they were in their 40s when they came, right? So they never had established a career or anything here. And so he was like, "Yeah, my parents live with us." And that was a huge issue in our marriage that, we had over and over many years of conflict and fight because of that. But that was just their norm. Like my husband just assumed that his parents would always live with us, right? And I just assumed that we would never live with parents. Like my parents live down the road, so they're not far, but they have their own place, they have their own social life, they have their own life, right? And we see them a couple times a week. Whereas living with my in-laws, and I did it for many years, 24/7, took a toll on me. It took a toll on my my health, my stress, my sleep. Um, and right now they're currently in Phoenix because my brother-in-law has children who are much younger than mine. I have teenagers now, so my nephews are younger, they still need babysitting help and this and that, so right now, my in-laws are there, But they still come and they spend 3 months here in the summer, right? Um, it's a lot better than 24/7, which was what I did for many years, but there's still some old wounds that come up, when they're back. So, it's a learning process, it's an evolving process, and I can't say it's perfect, and I can't say I'm perfect in the relationships, but, it's getting better.
I'm Jamaican and Guyanese, right? So my mom is from Guyana, my dad is from Jamaica, but I grew up majority of the time I spent in Jamaica. I've only been to Guyana one time. Um, so I identify more with my Jamaican side, right? Went to school there, spent lots of time. My husband grew up, he's from Jamaica as well, but he came from like the mountains. He never even saw the beach. He's never even seen the river. He lived on the top of his little mountain, and that was it for until he came to America when he was 12. And you would think like, "Oh, we're from the same place," but we are vastly different. I am a city girl. I grew up mainly in the city. He grew up in the country, right? So the way his perception of the world is extremely different than my perception. Um, Same culture, but very different, right? So even
Mhm.
within when we get married and we choose a partner and we think, oh, we chose a partner and this person's the same, so we should things should be easy, but there's so much nuance, right? So even with your husband, okay, yes, you are Indian, he is Indian, but there's worlds of difference between the two of you because of how he grew up versus how you grew up. And then your expectations and his expectations. And I think too often we don't talk enough about the nuances of choosing a partner within your culture, but yet coming from different worlds, right? And how that impacts the relationship, how that impacts how you raise your kids, how you guys interact, the health of your relationship, the health of you, right? Um, so I'm so glad you brought that up because we don't talk enough about it. We
No,
do not
and it's
talk.
been a struggle. It's
Yeah.
definitely been a struggle. So we'll be married, 24 years this summer. Um, and, like I said, we've had rough days, we've had rough years where
You
it was like, well, I didn't feel great all of 2011 or whatever it was, like, and he would say, "Oh, I hated whatever this year." And, we've both considered divorce, we've both considered, like, just leaving it and being done with it, and then I don't know why, but we keep coming back to each other, and, we've both done some personal growth and some, we read books, we now our communication has improved, we realized there was a lot of miscommunication and misinterpretation of actions in the past that now we can say, "Hey, that's not what I meant when I did that. Like, you took it that way, but that wasn't my intention." So we're working on it, and things are better. But it's a journey.
Mhm. What do you think has been I mean, I'm sure it's probably a bunch of things, but if you could think about maybe one thing that keeps bringing you back together, what is when you think about or when you guys have thought about walking away, what is that thing besides maybe the kids, right? Like, oh, we have a family. But
Yeah.
besides that,
Even before the kids, even
oh,
before we
yeah.
had kids, because so another struggle that I had was infertility. So it took me several years to get pregnant, but even before we had kids, I don't know, we definitely there was an attraction and a bonding between us, and I think it must have been that because I barely knew him. So, um,
What do
I
you
grew
mean,
up in New
Amy? So
York.
tell me, how did you guys get
Yeah,
together? What do you mean you
this is an
barely knew
interesting
him? Was it
story.
okay? Was it arranged?
Kind of. So I grew up in New York, and he was living in Minneapolis at the time, and our Indian community hosts these like singles events. And so my parents we had grown up New York, New Jersey crowd. So my parents knew all the organizers of this event. I had known them since I was little. We grew up with them. So I was 22, I think. I was very young when I got married. I just graduated college, and my parents were like, you're going to this convention, singles convention. It was like a 2-day event in New Jersey, and they were there. They were, helping out on the parents sit in a separate room, but they're there too. So they all met each other, and we all met. And uh, so they were there. They were helping out this and that. And my husband was living in Minneapolis, but he had a cousin in New Jersey who told him, it's like, hey, maybe you want to think about coming to this thing. So he flew in from Minneapolis. His parents were there too, but you know, they they were guests. They were flown in this and whereas my parents knew like the whole, community and everybody. And we had assigned tables and we ended up sitting right next to each other. And it was a 2-day event, right? So Saturday morning he sits down right next to me. And we got to chatting. And then they had these like boring speeches in the beginning of, the founders. When you're 20 something, you're like, oh my God. So my husband, you know, obviously him at the time, we started playing Hangman, I think it was, because they had like notepads and pens on. So I think we started with a Hangman, and there was like a dot game where you had to make the boxes with the dots.
Yeah.
We were just kind of entertained, and there was an initial spark attraction for sure. So the weekend, we had a great time. We spent a lot of time together on the weekend. He flew back to Minneapolis Monday morning. I went back to New York. I think he called me a couple days later. And then I called him. We were on the phone. This was in September. So in October, he came out to visit me. He flew out, stayed with his cousin. We had dinner and this and that. Then I flew out. He flew out. So we met in September. We got married the following August. So it was 11 months. And our relationship was totally long distance. So I would fly out to Minneapolis once a month. He would fly out here every 2 weeks. Like we would see each other. And we were flying once a month and this and that. So we knew each other, but I didn't really know him. I've never lived with him. I was never spending more than a weekend with him. So it was kind of a whirlwind romance. And then of course our parents were pressuring us to get married because that's what they do in Indian culture. I don't know about you guys, but as soon as we were dating for a few months, they're like, well, when are you getting married? When's this? When's that? And the pressure was on. And I was so young. I was only 23 when I got married. I didn't know what was going on. I just wanted a big wedding. It's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's have a party. Not realizing that the wedding is actually attached to a marriage, which is the long-term decision that I just completely went over my head at that age. But yeah, so we ended up getting married. And here's another interesting part. We moved to Boston after we got married. My husband transferred his job to the East Coast because I'm like, I need to stay close to my parents. So he moved here. And within 4 months of us getting married, I got diagnosed with cancer. So again, he was in Boston and my dad's a doctor in New York, right? So I moved back home to New York because he knew all the, oncology doctors and nurses. And so for 6 months, I stayed at home while I was getting my treatment. And my husband would, again, drive down every weekend after work from Boston to New York, spend the weekend with me, and then go back. And then he would take like 2 days off when I had my chemo treatments, and then he would go back. So it was, yeah, our relationship was rough from the start. And then it got worse. It got better. It got worse. It got better.
But what was
So
that like, Amy, so there's this whirlwind of like meeting this man, getting married, having a wedding, and then cancer.
yeah,
Like that wasn't in the cards. How did that
no.
show up? What was that time in your life like to
It was so crazy because we had just moved, right,
Yeah.
to this apartment in Boston. And then I had this like cough that just wouldn't go away. And everyone was like, oh, maybe the apartment had a cat in the last, maybe they had a pet, the last owners, or maybe it's your new down comforter, or maybe it's your, I don't know, the new environment that you're in. Maybe you're getting
Yeah.
allergies or whatever it was. Like,
Allergies? Yeah.
nobody took us seriously. I just had this cough, and I was like we were up a first floor walk up, so I was carrying groceries up the stairs, and I'd be out of breath, and I just thought, "Oh my god, I'm so out of shape."
Yeah.
Like, I can't even climb up the stairs with 4 bags of groceries. Um, and then in so we got married in August. In December, we had planned a trip to go to India because my husband's family, most of them were still there at that time, so I was going to meet, like, 90% of his family, and we had this big trip planned. They had a reception planned for us in India, um, and we were flying out of New York, so we drove down from Boston to New York on Friday, and I was still coughing, I wasn't feeling good. My dad was like, "You know what? You're getting on a plane Monday. Why don't you just go get an X-ray done?" Um, so we went to got it an X-ray. He wrote me a, script, got me in right away, called the doctor, his friend, and he was like, "Oh, my daughter's coming over." Um, so we did it, and then we went home. I was eating lunch, and I can remember this like it was yesterday. It was 22 years ago, but I can remember it like it's yesterday. We're eating lunch, and the phone rings, and the doctors were like, "You need to come to the ER right now." There's fluid around your heart. It's so compressed that, like, your heart can't even beat properly. We were like, "Okay."
Wow.
Ended up in the ER. They were like, "You need to have surgery tonight. You need to drain that fluid." So I had emergency surgery, and the doctor even told me, he's like, "If you had gotten on that plane Monday morning," he's like, "I don't know if you would have made it because your heart was so, like, constricted from all that fluid around it that," he was like, "I don't know, with the change in the pressure and this and that, you might have had some major issue on the plane." So we had to cancel our whole trip, right? That's when I moved back home because I was in the hospital for, like, 2 weeks. And this was, right around Christmas time, so I remember we did Christmas in the hospital, like, my family came to the little waiting room, on the floor, and we did Christmas there, and then I had treatments for 6 months. So my husband had just taken this new job in Boston, so he would drive, home Sunday night and come back Thursday night or Friday night and spend the weekend with me. So it was an interesting time. I mean, I was fortunate to get the treatment at home where my dad knew all the doctors and nurses, and, there was a small little town hospital where he had worked for 30 years, so they all knew him.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate to have that, but at the same time, we were trying to figure out, like, our first year of marriage and living apart again. Like, we still weren't living together. So it was definitely a journey and a story. And I'll just tell you one more thing that came
Yeah,
out
tell me.
through between, all the cancer, the infertility. I actually ended up having cancer again later when I had little kids. So at some point, I don't even remember when it happened, but I started calling myself a phoenix, like the mythical creature. And I would say, every time I go into the hospital for a stay or procedure or whatever, that would be like a burning day. And then I would emerge from it stronger than I was. And then something else would happen, and that would be another burning day. And then I would emerge from that. And I was so resilient. I still am. I'm very resilient and very like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to push through. Um, and so I still use that. It's in my business logo today.
But where do you think you learned that? I mean, where do you think that strength comes from for you?
I don't know. I think it was forced upon me, and I had to make a decision. Like, do you have to live with this cancer, or you have to get the treatments. How are you going to go through it? Are you going to be depressed and sad and, oh my God, my life's over and blah, blah, blah? Or are you going to be like, no, I'm going to get through this and push through and keep going? And I think I just didn't have a choice. I didn't think I had a choice. I just had to push through. And that's been I had to push through. There was a time where I thought I wouldn't have any kids at all, right? And we were looking into adopting and this and that. And then the IVF worked and I got pregnant. And I was like, oh my God. But there was a time where I thought I wouldn't have kids, right? And then I had 2 and I thought I was done, and I had a 3rd one naturally, so it was like, "Oh, okay, surprise."
Amazing.
Um, yeah, so I just there was a lot of instances in my life, between my health, my career, just being a mom, where I had to like really, my only option was push through and rise. I mean, that's how I adopted it. It's just you can go through it and mumble and grumble and this and that, or you can get through it and grow and, learn.
And I think sometimes, Amy, we go through things in this life. It helps us to then turn around and help guide other people then through, right? Because it's one thing to say, oh, I can help you figure out X, Y, and Z, never having gone through it. And it's something completely different to say, oh my goodness, let me tell you exactly what to expect, right? Because I've been there and this is what I did. And, maybe not all the steps might work for you, but this is what I found to work and maybe it could work for you. Um, and so the story becomes so much more rich because you've lived it. You didn't read a book about it. You didn't like go online and Google it, but you have the lived experience. And that that can't be taught, right? Um, so I wanted to ask you, um, Amy, as we wind down here, um, when you talk about, you say you want to help women live a rich life to their fullest potential. What are you hoping that that potential will be for them? What do you?
Finances, I know that's the first thing that people think of when we say rich, right? But that's not it. Health. Speaking from a person who, thought she was gonna lose her life.
Yeah.
Health, happiness, and an inner peace, I think, is so my business is actually called The Wealth of Wellness, right? Because your health, your happiness, your spirituality, your essence is the most important currency you will ever have, right? It's not the material things, it's not the money. It's really thriving in life. And I know what it's like to be surviving through each day. And I now know what it's like to thrive in life. And I really would just love to have all the women, especially the moms, because that hits me hard. If the moms are thriving, the kids are thriving. If the moms are happy, the kids are happy. If the moms are healthy, the kids are happy. So it's just, they're the gatekeepers for the future.
And so in speaking about the kids, Amy, your three boys watching you burn and rise and burn and rise, what do you hope they internalize about the resilience as they watch you?
I hope they gain some strength from it. I hope they can see that they too can have that resilience. And I hope that they see all the support that I've had. Um, when I was sick, I had both my mom and my mother-in-law here for 3 weeks. They both had moved in. So between my husband had taken a couple weeks off, right? So between my mom, my mother-in-law, and my husband, one was cooking, one was taking care of the kids, and one was taking care of me, right? um, so I want them to see that they have support. Um, I want them to see that growth is possible. Anything is possible. And I harp on them, take care of your health. You only have one body. That's your home. So take care of it. So I hope they learn that too.
And if you could tell anything to women watching, a major takeaway, what would you want them to know?
So if something feels off in your life, whether it's a health issue or a job issue or a relationship or whatever it is, um, do one thing to try to make it better. Like, I wouldn't try to overhaul your whole life in one day. I wouldn't start with everything all at once, but start with one thing that you can improve. And once you improve that and you feel better, take the next thing. Take the next thing. Take the next step, but just take it one day at a time, one step at a time.
I love that. I love that, Amy, because sometimes, the messaging that we get is change your whole life, right? Like, and and telling a mom or a woman to change their whole life,
Mm.
forget it. They're just not even going to make any moves, right? So I love that message of just pick one thing and then work from there, right? Um, I want to thank you so much, Amy, for your time and for your wisdom and for sharing your story. And I would like you to share with the people where they can find you on social media, your website. Where can the people find you?
Thank you so much for that. I am pretty active on social media, so you can find me at The Wealth of Wellness LLC. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Threads. I have a website, the same thing, thewealthofwellness.com. I have a podcast called This Incredible Mom Life, where I do share not only my own mom stories, but mom stories from other guests. So check me out there and, DM me to say hi or email me. I'm pretty responsive and I'll get back to you. And I just want to get to know you. And I hope you learn something from my story.
Yes, thank you, Amy. And when you think about your ideal client, who might she be so that in case she's watching, she knows that you're talking to her and she'll reach out. So who might your ideal client be?
So I know there's a mom out there who's struggling, who feels like she's just surviving each day, maybe feeling like she lost a part of herself. And I'm here to tell you, you can go from surviving to thriving and you can find yourself. She's still in there and she is waiting to come out.
So if this message resonates with you, if that is your experience and what you are feeling right now, know that you are not alone. Please go ahead and reach out to Amy and she can help you on your journey. Thank you so much, Amy. And for all of you who are watching or listening, all the information that Amy gave will be down below. You can click it, the link, everything will be in the bio below here. So don't hesitate to reach out, even if you just have questions. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate you. This is the Narrative of Untold Stories podcast. Subscribe,
Thank
like,
you.
and share. Thank you.